Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, and for some reason, I never introduce myself, so I'm going to try to change this going forward. It will last 1 week. With me today is Susan Bailey. Welcome back, Susan.
Hi, I'm so happy to be back.
And we're going to take on an interesting topic with your expertise involved. This is a new episode of The Way of the Force, which I absolutely love this segment. It's my jam. It's getting to all the fun stuff. But today we're going to talk about animals and the Force.
This is so cool.
Which is super fun.
I feel like I've been hounding you to talk about this for a long time. So
it's cool. You're welcome to literally hound me about anything you want to talk about that's Force or weird related. And we'll get you on and we'll talk about it. I'm just slow.
Or maybe organized is a better way to put it. Who knows?
Is that the better way to put it? I'll be self-deprecating and just say that it takes me a long time to decide when to do stuff. But today, animals have had like a rapid increase in use, I would say, in Star Wars, how they're used, when they're used, what they're used for. We've had a significant increase in cute critters, like adorable critters that now you can buy at Galaxy's Edge.
I'm saving my dollars
stuffed
for that.
Form. You and I both bought Force owls. The Morai from Celebration. So we've got lots of examples of cool, interesting animals that are out there. And I would say that a lot of that influence and the change to sort of from space creature to animal, guide, connection to divinity really came about because of Dave Filoni and his interest in animals in general.
I totally agree with you. I think we're at a really interesting point in Star Wars history, because when you go back and look at, what animals were represented as in the original trilogy and even the prequels, they're more like creatures or monsters. And they're dangerous, or otherwise they're sort of just domesticated cows with blue milk.
Banthas.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have some scary creatures, you have some creatures that are there as a tool, but you don't really have creatures or animals that you can relate to. So it was really, I think, Dave who started it with the wolves in Rebels.
It started.
You think it was earlier
before that? Yeah. Because he's always had animals, at least in around. And I remember kind of the first. Maybe it started in Rebels with the Lothcats specifically, but that was the start. Also, maybe if we go back to Mortis and the interconnection with the the avatars of the Force in a way.
Well, and
them turning into creatures. Yeah, I would say actually, Clone Wars is probably where it started. It was his interest in how the Force interacts with nature.
I feel like we've reached sort of a peak right now, because we had, creatures or animals in Master and Apprentice and in Dooku Jedi Lost. Very much so, right at the same time in The Last Jedi and the last season of Rebels. So I think there's a huge evolution that's coming about in terms of our understanding of what animals are in Star Wars and what their relationship to the Force is, or whether they have a relationship.
But the first time we actually see a Force connection with an animal that is kind of on screen is actually Anakin with the beast that he ends up riding in the gladiatorial pit on Geonosis. And then we get the Varactyl riding in Revenge of the Sith.
And that was Obi-Wan. And now we have kind of a pre-understanding about how that might have come about from Master and Apprentice. That maybe that wasn't the first time that he did that.
And I know that in Legends, connections to animals was something that came up before. It is something that previous authors and other creators had thought about before, but I would say that it really took up the mantle of it with Rebels and with Dave Filoni's interest in actually exploring the natural world, and specifically with the Lothcat, with the Morai when Ahsoka comes back, with the wolves themselves on Lothal, the Loth wolves, with all of those kind of interactions, the space whales, the Purgle. He really showed that there is something happening between the Force and these animals out there. Oh, even the spiders on Chopper Base.
Yes, like the spiders that lived around the Bendu.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we talk about like what Dave Filoni said at Celebration about the wolves? Like, it made me weep. Like, it really did. I think, he had a great way of explaining how wolves are kind of like a center point or a balance point. Let's say maybe even a fulcrum in nature because of how they are thought to be frightening, but in a way their predation saves some of the natural world. Like we've seen in national parks how the reintroduction of wolves has actually led to increased wetlands, because the wolves eat creatures that were eating things that were preventing the wetlands from, like they were eating things like things that would like
deer and yeah.
And so then like beavers were able to like build dams because they had trees, because the trees weren't being eaten by the deer. And so because the wolves ate the deer, there were more trees, and then there were more, and then the beavers could build dams, and then the wetlands reappeared. So it's like
and the wetlands ended up causing less flooding downstream because there was more like water retention in those locations.
And then birds and other creatures came back because they had a water source to drink from. And so I think he sort of thinks of the wolves as being like an example of how nature is in balance when we don't disrupt it. And that's really, I don't think you can deny the influence of like Princess Mononoke or like the Hayao Miyazaki films, or maybe even Japanese Shintoism on that. The idea that like nature itself, without the disruption of human culture or technology, is itself in balance. It's already good in a sense. And so,
well, it's like the tide, right? If things die and are reborn, right? New life is reborn in its place. And like the wolves influencing, like for some reason from a moralistic, humanistic perspective, we think that death in a creature that kills is maybe not a good thing. And that's sometimes why like wolves were being hunted out of areas, because they're scary and they kill. But they kill the creatures that, if left by themselves, would disrupt
the balance,
all of it.
Yeah. And it's not that there's anything wrong with deer, but it's like if there's too many of them, then they cause problems.
There's a weird symbiosis in the human body between, this is going to be such a weird example, so I apologize in advance, between fungus and bacteria. Right? So if you have,
we need them.
If you don't have enough bacteria in your body, like the good bacteria, the bacteria that's in your gut and on your skin and in your whole body, you get too much fungus and it turns into, things like thrush. So in your mouth, you'll end up getting like white spots and stuff like that. Because if you're, say, on antibiotics too much because the bacteria took over, the thrush fungus that naturally lives on your body will become out of balance and start to hurt you.
Or if you overuse like antibacterial soap or hand sanitizer or things like that, that can do damage to your skin.
Yeah. Because you no longer have those bacteria that help protect you. It's really fascinating how much like we think we're doing a good thing by, say, removing something from the world, from the environment, when really it ends up causing a different set of problems.
I think the, the wolves and, their, the other animals that they eat, and accepting the fact of, of death and things like that, really just kind of shows how the desire to stop death is truly evil.
Yeah.
How like the impulse to, try to save someone disrupts the balance of everything. That's just a truly evil thing to try and make that natural process not occur.
And that's what Yoda was trying to say. Maybe he didn't get it across in Empire Strikes Back, but like, if you care about them, you will let them die if they need to, like, if that's the way of the Force, right? Because putting the galaxy out of whack to save something that you think needs saving is part of the evil, right?
Yeah.
That was Anakin's mistake. That is Palpatine's mistake too, right? It's that he cares more about the idea of changing the course of nature.
Yeah. And so you can see how somebody like, Qui-Gon interacts totally differently with like the living Force and things like that, as opposed to how Palpatine would, where instead of trying to use your power to manipulate it and control it, you kind of try to understand how it ebbs and flows naturally and then go with it.
Yeah, very much, the idea of riding or letting the Force take you where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Yes. Interesting.
And I think, when you look at animals and how they behave, so, I mean, their emotions are very, I guess I would say, I don't want to say pure, but they are unfiltered, by culture or anything like that. So it's a way for, maybe a good example for the Jedi to try to understand how to contact the Force, because if you like strip away all the stuff that's going on in your mind and you just reach out with pure emotions, just like animals do, then you'll contact something more fundamentally, powerful, I guess.
Yeah. And that's what connecting to the Force is basically about is what do you feel? Right? Like we hear that in The Last Jedi with Luke talking to Rey. Yoda brings it up several times in Rebels. How feel you? It's this idea that if you're connected with your own feelings and you're not letting the garbage of your, like, what it means get in the way, that you have a very base connection.
Yeah.
And you yourself, Susan, have a pretty fundamental connection with animals.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with lots of cats, but I've been a pet store manager for about 6.5 years. So I see all kinds of animals on a daily basis. And I know this might sound hokey, but I really try to just sort of like open myself up to what I think that I can tell that they're feeling. And sometimes you can, really tell like this one is afraid, or this one is feeling pure joy, and then connect to that feeling so that you can help them in the best way possible. And I mean, there's nothing better than seeing a creature who is just full of pure joy. And, I was thinking about how you were talking on one of your previous episodes about like the way of the Force is to seek joy. And if you can kind of like connect with that, like imagine, like a puppy at play, that's an example of pure joy. I mean, like that is a very, I kind of think about that as like a way that the Force maybe manifests itself in the world or something like that. Is like, you look at that pure joy of that animal, or like you look at like a cat sleeping, like just the utter calm and rest that it is able to achieve is like very important for us in this like world of anxiety and going quickly and moving and things like that. So like if you can get down to that level of like calm and peace of that napping cat, that's like really therapeutic and spiritual. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And animals in Star Wars, especially like I would say in the post Clone Wars phases, we'll say that, are there with intention. I would say even
Yes.
even the Porgs on the island of Acto are there to be cute, to replace Puffins. Like, you know, they had a purpose, right? Which was they knew the Puffins would be there, so they replaced them, or they put the Porgs in to make it seem like, oh, this is what lives here and this is what you can see flying around in some of the shots, so they didn't need to digitally edit out.
But they have an important role in the story.
They do. Did you want to talk about that?
Well, so I mean, one of the things is when Luke and Rey are talking about the balance of the Force, like the Porgs, you see shots of the Porgs as like examples of how they show balance, like comfort, and you know, the mother like comforting her children, and like sorrow and loss when, you know, a nest is destroyed. But I think the most important part is actually really Chewie with the Porgs, because they are just like unbelievably cute, but there's a way in which he kind of learns a lesson of compassion by kind of understanding their, you know, seeing them and understanding their suffering. And maybe his indiscriminate eating of Porgs might cause pain to other creatures, and then he maybe feels a little bit more circumspect about what his actions might be in the future. And you can see that he kind of comes to a different relationship with them. He like lets them sort of infest the Falcon, you know, and he's kind of like living with the Porg.
I'm weirdly excited to see if we still have Porgs in 9.
Like they're just like popping out of holes and stuff like that. So instead of him, like by the end, he's just like brushing them aside.
Yeah.
And being like, oh, you're just kind of here in the way of what I need to do. I'm not like grabbing you and like munching or like throwing you across the room. You're just kind of like brushing them away. Like you have yes. a right to be here. Not right there. Just go over somewhere
just
else.
not on this panel.
Not on this panel. Just go over there.
You do have a right to exist. You don't have a right to exist right here where I need to press
right.
Yeah. And that's really interesting because it certainly sets up an idea that we've seen, like, and reiterates the concept, the theme, the motif that we have seen in Rebels, especially with Ezra connecting with animals and how powerful that connection is with them, especially the Loth cats. And I did want to talk about his connection with animals and how it goes through several phases.
Yeah.
And actually has a little bit of a turn to the dark side, especially when he connects with the animals that live on the former Clone Wars base.
Oh, like the shadow creatures.
The shadow creatures, how he starts to control humans, which are kind of like animals.
Yeah, in our own way.
And how, yeah, and how much that mirrors now what we're seeing from a dark side creature perspective, control of dark side.
Yeah.
The dark side control of animals.
Yeah, I guess this is spoilers. I'm going to talk about Dooku Jedi Lost. So I hope that's not too bad. But
I mean, we could skip out the end part, but there is a creature.
There is a creature, and he connects, and Dooku connects to this creature, and it's kind of a dark connection, and he manipulates that connection in destructive ways. How about that? Is that okay to say?
Yeah. But it started out in some ways kind of innocently because of his
connection to his home planet, or
connection to his home planet, which is really interesting. Like the idea that you can be connected because of your bloodline and because of you can be connected with something fundamental. And the creature itself is called the Terataka.
Yeah.
And it is considered to be a world dragon.
Yeah.
Which is so cool, of Sereno.
Which is, it's like so mythological that there is a dragon holding a planet together, you know?
Yeah. and it almost represents the spirit of the animal. And in years gone by, when the Sith controlled Sereno, it was enslaved.
Yeah.
And so when Dooku came by, at some point in his childhood, he awoke it because of his connection to the planet, to the like ruling family of Sereno, because, you know, he ends up becoming Count Dooku. And
the planet is named after his family. So it's the planet is sort of like he has a familial connection to it as an
in some ways, like, yeah, there's like an ownership factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're tied. They're right. Very much bound together. Count Dooku and Sereno, the Teratokra, representing almost like the soul of the planet, and like all of the things that had happened in the past to it. In the same story, Dooku Jedi Lost, we're also introduced to the idea and the concept of Sith war beasts. And the Teratokra very much becomes one of these.
And through Dooku's connection to the Teratokra, he learns how it became a Sith war beast, and it's not pretty. And so, I mean, I guess it kind of makes a person think, you know, like, okay, well, a person can be strong in the Force, a tree can be strong in the Force, an animal could be strong in the Force. Could it be strong? You know, you could say the dark side is strong in one kind of animal, or is that potential there all the time, but it's sort of tortured into bringing forth its trauma in a violent way, kind of in the same way that, you know, Asajj Ventress or Savage Opress are sort of like prodded into going further or becoming more angry. It makes me think about, you know, about what he did to his disciples, and what the Sith did to those creatures to get them to comply.
Yeah.
And
that very much aligns to how Dark Force users treat other things that they want to control. And it is about control. It's about, you know, utilizing the resources that you have. Additionally, like Ezra goes through a very similar, I don't know, like
he has,
willingness to use the creature rather than to connect with the creature.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Because like he goes through several different kind of examples through the course of Rebels. Ezra first tries to connect with the Lothcat by controlling it. And then only by kind of like letting go and understanding is he able to actually connect with the Lothcat. Same with the human that he ends up controlling, he totally killed that guy. I'm just going to say it. It's like third season. Right at the start of the third season, he's on a mission on his own and he controls like a walker driver and drives the walker off the platform.
He did that.
Yeah. So our boy Ezra had some dark in him for a little while.
Don't we all, though, really? I mean, that's a struggle. So,
yeah.
But I think, you know, the way that he finally relates to the wolves is so much different than how he starts out by, and I think that that's a, you know, a real trick that a lot of people who have power have any kind of power have a difficult time with, is trying to figure out how to exercise that power. The easiest thing to do is to force it to happen through, you know, control and violence, not to sort of like let a connection flow. But then it's to everybody's mutual benefit when he does, because the wolves are able to take him and, like, through a huge amount of effort, take him somewhere where he needs to go. And it's through sort of asking, or persuading, or having a common mission together, as opposed to sort of like enforcing your will.
Yep. And I mean, this comes back to a theme that we'll always see coming up in the Force, right? Which is what this segment is all about, is that the light side is about connection and the dark side is about control.
Yeah.
And the animals themselves are maybe not always what they seem. I would say the Loth wolves and the Loth cats are the best example of probably what we would say almost like manifestations of the Force on Lothal.
Yeah, or sometimes I think of them maybe sometimes as like a messenger, or
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
or a teacher, or someone who's there to show you how to be, or what the right way to be is. So like I think a good example of an animal being a messenger possibly might be Poe and the Vulptexes, the crystal foxes. Like this is part of his, I think, development as a leader, where instead of him trying to be like, I have a plan, I'm going to take control of this, he reverts to a more, or he evolves into a more sort of observational thing, or of observational way of being, where he tries to like lead a group of people into a safe situation instead of forcing that thing to happen. They sort of notice that all these foxes are running into the cave, but he's the only one who noticed that they're gone. And and so he's like, wait, something is wrong in my environment. And then the fox looks back at him and then runs away into the hole. And whether or not that fox was trying to tell them, come follow me, or whether he saw the fox and said, emulating this native creature of this planet is a great way to proceed. Either of them is a good.
Well, it's the Qui-Gon, being mindful of the living Force, right? It's like being aware of your surroundings and acknowledging them and almost like respecting them.
Yeah.
And I feel like nobody talks about the Loth cat, Loth wolf rhyme enough.
What's the rhyme?
So it's like Ezra uses it a couple of times in the fourth season. He's like, Loth rat, Loth cat, Loth wolf run, pick a path, and all is done.
Oh, I forgot about that.
It's like a nursery rhyme. It's probably something very fundamental to the planet's culture, because we know Lothal is a weird Force place.
Right. And that's one of those cool things about, that animals participate in Star Wars, is that they're, part of the living Force. And so a planet can have, even a planet, like I think of, like when when Luke flies towards, I'm totally like taking this conversation off course, but like, when Luke flies towards Dagobah, he says like the life sign readings are off the charts. So what that tells me is like, he's not even talking about like the human population. It's just sort of like a life form there. And that's why the planet is a powerful place to be, is because there is so much life there.
Why Yoda is able to hide, because there's the living Force is just thriving on Dagobah.
It makes me wonder, like how the Force might be a little bit shaded a little bit differently on different planets. And
we got the concept of a dark side versions of the Force in Dooku Jedi Lost as well. So there's certainly the idea, and I don't think that the spiders themselves leaned particularly good side.
No.
Right.
I mean, they definitely react towards, like fear and anger and stuff like that, and thrive on it, which is, that's dark side stuff.
The Bendu is very tries to teach Ezra that like not everything is the same, and you kind of have to listen to them.
Right.
You can't necessarily collaborate and connect with this type of animal in the way that you think, right? And nor is that necessarily a bad thing. It just is. That's
part of letting go of control, because if you think that everything is the same and you can treat everything the same way, that's you imposing something on it instead of you listening. And that's, I think when you approach, like when I observe or approach animals in my life in that way of sort of like listening or observing, then I think, you have a much better connection with them than by sort of like enforcing your will.
Exactly. So where in our culture might some of these concepts be coming from? We've talked a little bit about like, Dave's influences,
Right.
Dave Filoni's influences in bringing creatures in. He's a huge fan of wolves.
Yeah, totally.
So him bringing in wolves anywhere, not unexpected, and making it justifiable to the story, I think is really fascinating that he wanted to bring in more animals. Obviously, him and his wife are huge animal lovers. The idea of bringing in wolves because they are this very symbiotic element in nature.
Yeah.
Was a really interesting story choice.
If we're trying to swing back and forth to find some balance, like I think in Dave's mind at least, the wolves represent balance, like an accepting of the dark and the light together and like saying it's all okay. So yeah. So I think, definitely, and Dave said that and I mentioned this before, that he was really influenced by Princess Mononoke and the wolves. But from my observations, in my academic background, I can see some sort of possible mythological religious precedents to some of these understandings in some of my background in Hinduism and Buddhism. So
do you want to talk about those a little bit?
From my academic background in religious studies, there are 2 points that I think would be really helpful to us to understand animals in Star Wars. And so the first point I would make is that not everything is as it appears. And second, sometimes animals can teach you the right way to be or have a lesson for you. So the first example that I have is the incarnations of Vishnu. Krishna is one of them, and you've probably heard of him. But in his incarnations, the first 3 are actually animals. There's a fish, a tortoise, and a boar. All of them save the world from a demon. So basically, every one of his incarnations is to come and save the world from the forces of chaos and disorder, and to like reinstate order. So the first 3 times that he comes to Earth to save it from destruction, he comes as an animal. So I think we've seen so I think what we could learn is that animals can also save the universe or save the world in their own way. And it also starts to teach us the lesson that like maybe they're not what they appear to be, and the second religious example that I have is the Buddhist Jataka tales. So these are the stories of the many lives of the Buddha before he became the historical Buddha, Gautama Buddha, and then became enlightened. So there are well over 500 stories, and there are even like religious monuments to events that took place in different locations. One of the things you see is that it takes many times of effort for him to get to the point where he can become enlightened. And some of the stories, some of the ways that he starts are having births as different animals. And before he even, becomes a human. So he kind of like goes through a series of different births. And one of the common themes among these animal stories of his birth is that they do something self-sacrificial or generous in order to aid another creature. And that is an example of the kind of thing that a Buddha would do. And it makes me go back to George Lucas talking about the difference between, like, if you're trying to understand if something is like a Jedi act or maybe a good light side act, is the difference between selflessness and selfishness. So,
Yeah.
so in the Hindu examples, it's in these examples, the stories, Vishnu is taking the form of an animal to accomplish what he needs to accomplish. But I think in the Buddhist stories, it's something different. It's showing that animals performing selfless acts, and that they too are capable of that kind of level of spiritual action. And that's kind of an example to us of how we should be.
That's really interesting. That really ties back for me when Ezra ends up connecting with the space whales, the Purgle, and how, his friends were in danger, but instead of just letting it lie and leaving, he helps the Purgle get the gas that they need to be able to, feed and survive.
I think of this line that comes up like repeatedly in Star Wars where it's like, I know what I need to do.
Oh,
like Ben, Kylo Ren says that to his father. He's like, I know what I need to do, but I don't have the strength to do it. Will you help me? And then, and then it comes up over again. And Ezra says it right then too. And he's like, I know what I have to do. And
yeah, at the end when the Purgle come to save Lothal.
And he sees through Kanan's selfless act and through the Purgles, and that he too, that what he has to do, his destiny as a Jedi is to be selfless. And he has put himself in a position where he has the ability to do something huge, and his selflessness saves a civilization
and allows it to prosper, separate from the galactic war.
And the other thing I would bring up is that in Buddhism, there's also this idea of the bodhisattvas who are on the edge of enlightenment, but are so compassionate and selfless that they have made a vow to let every other creature go before them into enlightenment. And that's a real kind of selfless thing to do. And so in the example of sometimes the bodhisattvas, you're not going to look at them and realize this is a compassionate creature here because they're glowing in gold and stuff like that. They could be anyone, and when you look at the stories of the Buddha and his previous lives, you could look around and see future Buddhas all around you. So I guess one of the points then is everything is not as it appears. I mean, go back to Yoda saying, judge me by my size, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Or people underestimating Rey, the scavenger. She beat you. It could be that this girl might be the one to save everyone. It might be that your cat is a future Buddha. You don't know. So it might be.
Millicent kills the bad guys and saves the galaxy.
It could be that a little green man is a powerful, is strong and powerful, or this really nice looking senator is actually the most evil man in the whole galaxy. Or it could be that a crystal fox is there to show you the way to safety. You don't know. Mm-hmm. That could be a Buddha. That could be a Buddha on its way to enlightenment, future spiritual creature.
Very much the Force exists in all things. And this ties very much back to, Qui-Gon trying to convince Obi-Wan Kenobi that Jar Jar Binks is somebody to be respected.
Everything is not as it appears.
Everything is not as it appears. And, just because you don't think something is useful doesn't mean the universe feels that way.
Yeah. Just because you think that this father is here to, to be bet upon, it's a creature that deserves compassion and has feelings also. That goes back to the whole observing and flowing with instead of controlling.
Such a good tie back to especially the lesson Rose is trying to teach Finn.
Everything on Canto Bight is not as it appears.
Exactly.
Yeah. It looks glittering and beautiful, but underneath there's suffering and pain.
And there's a little bit more beauty in allowing things to be as they're meant to be. The fathers, when they're free, Finn appreciates how nice it is that they let them go by the end.
Yeah. And that could be even a more beautiful thing than all the gold in Canto Bight.
Oh, such a good point.
And so then I think I also just sort of reiterated my second point, which was that, is that, creature, any animal could be there to show you or teach you a lesson, or show you the right way to be, teach you how to be selfless, teach you how to have compassion, show you how to, even think about like the Thala sirens, right? They're just kind of living their life, hey, like Luke, you need some stuff, here you go. You need to take it. Right?
And in some ways, like, they're there from a story perspective to remind Rey of her femininity.
Yeah, and sort of like boundless compassion and generosity that can be, or that.
Thalassirans are there, and they look at Rey, and Rey is like, oh, this is interesting, until they actually like look at her. And Ty Black has, of course, amazing YouTuber as she is, and sometimes co-host of the show, brings up that is, like, in some ways, nature's reminding her of her own femininity, right? She has femininity within her, but also it is a reminder of, how the universe gives, and it's there for you to,
and that's part of the Thala siren, just being sort of like in tune with its own existence. Like, I provide that, I feed, and all may come to me who need food, and just kind of like really look at me and look at, look at the abundance that there is. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, like, the Thalasiren is very much like a mother representing
kind of figure.
The goddess in some ways, right? Like the idea of the all things come from me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Thalasiren. So Ty made me a shirt with hearts.
I know. I got one of those stickers. But
they really do need to be appreciated, because they're such an interesting animal in Star Wars. And like, can we just appreciate how many animals Rian Johnson's movies blessed us with?
Oh my gosh, like, so many animals. I think this might be one of the top reasons why I like that movie so much. It's because there's so many animals.
We got a solid Hapabore in TFA.
Yeah,
domesticated cow-like creature.
Sure.
Or riding like creature. We got the steel peckers in TFA.
Who are that was scavengers. Really that's another
scavengers. Yep.
And that's a great way how Rey is sort of like an animal, and that she, and especially like dogs who are scavengers, or jackals or things like that. They have to,
vultures. Yeah.
They live off of the leftovers of human culture. They survive off of our leftovers,
and they're very important for the ecosystem too. Without scavengers, there's a lot more disease. And things don't break down quickly enough to sort of take care of things that can cause even more destruction.
This isn't really a scavenger, but like, I was even grateful when I was living in India for the goats that would wander around, because they're like mulchers. They would eat all the organic refuse. So like, you had flowers that were decaying, they eat it. You cut down part of a tree, they eat it. It's just, they're just kind of like garbage disposals, cleaning up things.
Yeah, actually, the city that I live in has started to utilize herds of goats to eat all of the thistle, because they no longer want to use like herbicides in our natural parks, and so they like unleash the goats. And the goats, this particular breed of goat, loves like Canadian thistle especially, which is like very invasive and hard to get rid of. It's very strong against herbicides, but goats like love it. And it's like candy. So they like unleash the goats.
Here you go. The goats are kind of like the wolves of Calgary. They're like keeping the thistle
at bay. The thistle at bay.
I wish they
come here, thistle. We need space goats.
I'm I'm pro goat, so I'm totally for it. But I didn't even mention this to you, but the Hindu goddess of motherhood is a cat.
Oh, interesting.
And it's because of how and it's partly because of how the female cat, as they're feeding their children, just sort of like lie there and provide in the way that the thalassirens do, but then they also like protect them so fiercely from danger, and then also teach them how to survive. So that's an ideal of motherhood as a cat.
And that's really interesting because, very much goddesses have two sides to them. They have this like nurture, provider, creator side, and then they also have a vengeful side if you screw with their creations.
Right. And I think, it's for us as humans, or even maybe for us as Westerners, it's difficult to sort of look at a creature like that and say, well, that's a frightening creature, or that's a frightening goddess. But if you are her child, you would love for her to be frightening, because that means she is protecting you and preserving you.
Yeah, it's like the mama bear idea, right?
Right. It's the whole mama bear idea. So like, as long as you are able to put yourself in a position to her as her child, then you're totally safe, because she might discipline you, because mothers definitely do that. And so if you do something wrong, but I mean, you probably know this as a mother, you're going to tell that kid, no, don't do that. That's dangerous. And the next thing you do is you tell them, like, I still love you, and you give them a hug. That's kind of how the goddesses are too. They're going to discipline you, and then they still love you.
And there is that balance with that.
Yeah.
Susan, do you have any other thoughts on this topic? I feel like it's pretty awesome. The connection to animals itself is fundamentally about balance and about finding sort of the are you trying to connect, or are you trying to control? And how characters interact with animals in the Star Wars universe very much shows what side of the Force they might be leaning into.
I'm really excited right now for where things are going. And I just want to encourage people, when they see animals and humans or sentients interact in Star Wars, just try to think what you can learn about the humans from that interaction, and what you can learn about the Force from that interaction. What can the animals teach you about what the Force is, or how to live in tune with the Force, by observing and putting yourself in tune with that interaction.
Yeah.
So
Great.
I'm really excited to see what's going to happen next, and what other creatures there might.
We're getting horse type creatures.
The Orbox. I'm so excited, to hear. I'm curious. I'm going to be curious to see what that planet or culture's sort of relationship with those creatures is going to be like. And I'm sure there's going to be some kind of cute animal that they're going to give us that we haven't even seen yet.
I'm so excited. We need more cute animals. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not an animal. We got cute BB-8. We got cute Porgs, and they're both round little balls. So maybe they'll be.
Well, we got Bibo.
Yep.
Bibo.
Yep.
In Bibo in Star Wars Resistance, which is a really interesting way to show your things are not always what they seem.
Oh my gosh.
Again.
I laughed so hard at that episode, because I feel like I've seen so many people come into my store and they're like, look, I found a Bibo. And I'm like, oh, no, don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just a reminder that things are not always what they seem, even though they might be cute and cuddly.
And they
they're
don't
actually
exist
large.
Independently or unrelated to other things. If there's the baby has a mother.
Exactly. Yep. If this is a baby, there's a mother out there. Well, thank you so much, Susan, for digging into animals and the Force with me.
I loved it. It was my pleasure.
Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Night Sister Ashla. So it's NIGHTSISTR. no E, and then ASHLA, which is kind of, I tried to make a name of balance, some dark and some light. And then I'm also on the Organa Digest podcast with my co-host Laura. So please come find me there also. And you'll find me listening to other podcasts too.
Thanks for joining us in talking about animals and the way of the forest. Cheers. Thank you, everyone, for listening to What the Forests. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music composed by Christy Carew. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforest. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love What the Forest, In Wild Space, Night Huntress, and Susan. We are available wherever podcasts are found and YouTube. You can connect with us at Twitter at WT4 Show or on Facebook at What the Forest. Feel free to reach out to us and start a conversation. Cheers.